She was already walking down the aisle when I realized I had made the worst mistake of my life. The church in our small Missouri town was packed that June afternoon in 1962. Sunlight filtered through stained glass and painted the wooden pews in reds and blues. The organ was playing the wedding march, steady and certain, like nothing in the world could interrupt it. I stood at the back, hat in my hand, heart pounding so hard I thought the whole congregation might hear it. Clara Whitmore looked radiant in white. Calm. Composed. Her father's arm linked through hers. And at the front of the church stood David Langley, college-educated, steady job at the bank, the kind of man people described as reliable. I had once believed she would be walking toward me. You don't forget the sound of your own regret. It hums in your ears louder than any organ. I met Clara the summer after high school, 1957, when the evenings felt endless and the whole world seemed to glow golden just before sunset. Our town was small, 2 churches, 1 blinking traffic light, a diner called Maggie's with red vinyl booths and a jukebox that worked only if you hit it on the side. I worked at my uncle's gas station, wiping windshields and pumping fuel for $1 an hour. Clara worked afternoons at the public library, her hair pinned up loosely, a pencil tucked behind her ear. The first time I noticed her, she was standing outside Maggie's with a root beer bottle in her hand, laughing at something her friend had said. The screen door creaked behind me as I stepped out, and she looked up. It was one of those looks that lingers, curious, steady, like she wasn't just seeing you but considering you. That night I asked her to the drive-in. We parked my father's old Ford pickup near the back row under a sky full of stars. The movie flickered across the giant screen, but I couldn't have told you what it was about. I remembered the smell of popcorn and gasoline, the hum of crickets, and the way she leaned her head lightly against my shoulder during the slow parts. "I don't want to stay here forever," she said quietly. I laughed. Nobody does. But she wasn't joking. Clara had dreams that reached beyond our county line. She wanted to teach, maybe travel. She talked about Chicago the way some people talked about heaven. I, on the other hand, thought life was something that happened right where you stood. The first crack between us came the following year when I turned down a chance to attend trade school in St. Louis. My high school shop teacher had recommended me. Said I had a natural touch with engines. But my father had hurt his back at the mill, and the extra hands at the gas station mattered. "I can't leave," I told Clara one evening as we sat on the hood of my truck near the river. "For how long?" she asked. "As long as they need me." She nodded, but there was a distance in her eyes I hadn't seen before. The second turn came when she received her acceptance letter to a teacher's college in Illinois. I remember her running across Main Street waving that envelope in the air, nearly colliding with Mr. Henson's Buick. "I got in," she said, breathless. I hugged her, genuinely proud. But beneath that pride was something else, fear. "You'll come with me someday," she said. I smiled, but I didn't answer. She left that fall. The bus depot smelled of diesel and dust. She kissed me gently before boarding, pressing a folded piece of paper into my palm. "Don't let this town be the end of you," she whispered. Her letters came every week at first. Pages filled with stories of lectures and new friends and city lights reflected in river water. She described the sound of streetcars, the smell of roasted chestnuts in winter. I wrote back about oil changes and flat tires, about Maggie's diner and Friday night high school football games. It didn't take long for the space between our lives to widen. The third turn arrived in the form of a name I hadn't heard before. "David walked me home tonight," she wrote one spring. "He's in the business program." I told myself not to worry. People make friends in new places. But then the letters shifted in tone. Fewer inside jokes. More careful phrasing. One weekend, without warning, I drove 6 hours to surprise her. I stood outside her dormitory holding a small bouquet of daisies, heart racing. She came out with David. He was taller than me, wore pressed shirts even on weekends, and spoke with the easy confidence of someone who knew exactly where he was headed. Clara looked stunned to see me. "Why didn't you tell me you were coming?" she asked. "I thought you'd be happy," I said. "I am," she replied softly. "Just surprised." We walked along the campus lawn while David waited politely by the entrance. "You didn't mention him much," I said. I didn't think I had to. I should have trusted her. Instead, jealousy crept in like a shadow. The fourth turn came the night I accused her of choosing ambition over us. It was cruel and unfair. "You're changing," I said. "So are you," she replied. "Maybe we're growing apart." Her eyes filled with tears, but she didn't argue. When I drove back to Missouri, I convinced myself I had taken the honorable path, that if she wanted something bigger, she deserved someone who could give it to her. That's how pride disguises itself as sacrifice. Months passed. Letters slowed. Then one arrived with a tone so calm it frightened me. "David has asked me to marry him," she wrote. I haven't answered yet. I stared at that sentence for a long time. Instead of fighting, instead of driving back and telling her how much she meant to me, I wrote something measured and restrained. "I want you to be happy." What I meant was, choose me. What she heard was, I release you. The fifth turn came when my father passed unexpectedly that winter. A heart attack at the mill. Grief does strange things to a man. It strips away illusions. At the funeral, I realized how small my world had become, how many chances I had declined out of fear. 2 weeks later, I received a wedding invitation. June 14, 1962. Clara Whitmore and David Langley. I carried that invitation in my pocket for months. Told myself I wouldn't attend. Told myself it was better not to see it. But on that June afternoon, I found myself standing at the back of the church. And that's when I understood something clear as day: I loved her more than I feared losing. The organ played. Guests stood. Clara took her first steps down the aisle. My legs moved before my mind did. I stepped out into the aisle. Gasps rippled through the pews. "Clara," I said, voice shaking. Time froze. David turned, confused but dignified. "I'm sorry," I continued. "I should have fought for you. I should have told you I was afraid of not being enough. But I am here now." Silence filled the church like a held breath. Clara's eyes searched mine. Not angry. Not embarrassed. Just searching. "Do you love me?" she asked softly. "With everything I have. And will you leave this town if it means building something bigger, with me?" "Yes." She turned to David. "I'm sorry," she said, voice steady. "But my heart was never fully yours." It was not a dramatic scene, not shouting or chaos. Just quiet understanding. David nodded once and stepped aside. We left the church together that afternoon under a sky so blue it almost hurt to look at. It wasn't easy after that. There were whispers. There were hard conversations. I sold my share of the gas station and enrolled in trade school in St. Louis. Clara finished her degree. We rented a tiny apartment above a bakery that smelled of cinnamon at dawn. We struggled. We argued. We doubted. But we chose each other, over and over again. Years later, when we returned to our hometown with 2 children and a modest auto repair business, Maggie's Diner still stood on Main Street. The jukebox still stuck on the slow songs. Sometimes, on summer evenings, we would sit in the old Ford pickup, now fully restored, and watch fireflies rise over the river. "You almost let me go," she would say, smiling gently. "I almost did," I'd answer. Love isn't always lost in one grand mistake. Sometimes it waits, patient but not endless, for a man to gather the courage to claim it. That day in the church could have been the end of our story. Instead, it became the beginning of the life we built together. And even now, when I hear an organ playing at a wedding or catch the faint scent of gasoline on a warm evening, I am reminded that the bravest thing I ever did was walk down that aisle, not to interrupt a wedding, but to finally step into the life I was meant to share with her.